Hello, everybody. What I want to talk about today is control during the financial crisis. I work for Deutsche Bank. You will have seen my boss yesterday, Tony McCarthy, speaking. And Deutsche Bank, for those of you who don't know, is a large, universal, global bank that is dominant in its home market in the retail world, but also in the top 5 in pretty much every global markets product in every major financial center. My role is to run a group called Production. And what Production does essentially is it looks after the technology of the bank to operate it, to control it, and to ensure it's smooth running. That's quite a challenge for a bank like ours, which has about 140,000 desktops and laptops, 40,000 mobile devices. It has about 60,000 servers, and it also has about 5,600 applications, of which 900 are critical. So we have a hugely complex environment that has grown up over many years, and that in itself is a challenge. However, as I think it was Vineet talked about, he mentioned the word perfect storm, and I think for the past 3 or 4 years, since really the crisis in the credit crisis in 2009, it's felt like a perfect storm. And there's been a variety of threats that we've been dealing with. The graph you can see shows how our core volumes have been rising. And what you'll see is a number of peaks. And since the financial markets became unstable, we see more and more of these peaks of volatility. They happen more often and they're getting sharper. That very tall spike will stick in my memory for a long time. I came back from holiday on August the 7th. On August the 8th, we hit the peak of the euro confidence crisis, the sovereign debt crisis, and our volumes went through the roof. This actually shows the graph of one of our settlement systems, which is an equities platform, that we thought the capacity was about 3.2 million. Our record day ever had been about 2.8 at that point. On that day, we hit 6.6, and we averaged about 5 million for the week. And that is a massive struggle for an organisation like us. The complexity of the number of applications dependent on such an application meant that just trying to complete the day in a day was extremely difficult. So, as investment banks have moved from selling complexity to selling flow, what we're seeing is these types of spikes everywhere. And all these banks are struggling with it, as indeed are the exchanges. So that's one type of threat that we're having to deal with. The second type of threat that we're dealing with is the regulators. The regulators since 2009 have been all over investment banks like ours. In particular, some of the ones we're dealing with, such as the MAS in Singapore and the Fed in this country, are particularly focused on everything we're doing, and particularly focused on what IT's doing. We actually have 60 people from the Fed sitting on one of the floors in Wall Street of the Deutsche Bank offices who are just full-time looking at everything we're doing, and a number of them focused on technology. And the types of things that they're pushing us to do is to ensure that every single element of that technology stack, we have clear segregations of duty, we have clear security around it, and we have clear focus on how we have neutral control and independent verification of everything that's done. That is actually a major drain on what we do. It's a major drain at a time where we're trying to save cost, and everything we want to do around running the bank, we want to be able to do it at a cheaper cost. But the cost of regulation is becoming huge. For Deutsche Bank this year alone, I think the cost of responding to the many regulations is going to be well north of 300 million euros. The third type of threat that we've been dealing with during this period, and you'll see various threats mentioned up there, is the external attacks that we are seeing. I think particularly since the reputation of banks went down post the credit crunch, we've seen a lot more of these types of attacks. We see denial of service attacks from groups like Anonymous, the Stop Wall Street types. We see skimming attacks on our ATMs. And most worrying of all, we now see attacks on things such as RSA. So those of you who deploy numerous security technologies to protect your infrastructures, as we do, as all banks do, That is becoming a point of single failure, and the perpetrators out there are very much targeting those things so that they can steal not just the keys to one bank at a time, but the keys to many. And I think that's a big concern. And also, just to make things even more tricky for us during this year, we have a dual data center strategy for disaster recovery. And for the first time ever, that strategy was threatened in 2 of our primary locations within 1 year. It was threatened in Japan, obviously a big market for us, where we saw the tsunami and the nuclear crisis that put at risk both our data centers that are in and around Tokyo. And then we also saw a Hurricane Irene, hitting New York, and we had a very interesting weekend debating which data center should fail over to which other data center, and having to make those decisions minute by minute. So we have seen a unique period of threats, a unique period of challenge. One of the fortunate things we did do was that a few years ago, we saw that this type of trend was likely to happen. We saw that banks were going to move from complexity to flow, and that there was going to be much more challenges around control. We saw the need for greater regulatory face-off, and we decided to reorganize our operating model. Tony talked a bit about it yesterday, but the first part of our operating model that we looked to reorganize was production. And what we did was we took the various groups that were supporting applications at the time out of the different businesses, and we moved them into a single group. And we started a journey, and HCL have been very much part of that journey with us. And we started that journey on how we could have consistent practices, consistent processes to really ensure we could raise the bar around control. For the first time, we put all the experts under the same roof that would actually give us the visibility all the way from the front office applications through the back office applications, the accounting applications. But also now, and more recently, we brought in also all the infrastructure into the group, so we can actually see all the way through the technology stack. That gives us the advantage now that we can start to look at capacity as an end-to-end challenge, and we'll try to answer the questions: what does it mean to you if US equity volumes double? What will it mean to which parts of the technology infrastructure? Actually, complex questions to answer. It's also given us the chance to build integrated monitoring architectures to actually be able to look at anything, any alert, be it coming from the infrastructure, the application, and actually try to correlate that up to the business process that really means something to the businesses that we are ultimately supporting. As I've run this group over the last year, 2 years, it's become very clear to me that in our structure, and we are heavily leveraged in this structure, this group, to give you an idea of size, is about 7,000 people, of which 2,000 are internal and 5,000 are external. But the major challenges that we have, which are essentially capacity, control, client focus, completing the processing of a day in a day, actually, as you look at it, for a production organisation like mine, is exactly the same as the challenges faced by operations groups. They exactly are trying to deal with the same things. And if we look at something like end-to-end capacity, when you're getting into the types of volumes that we're dealing with in the millions, if you have an STP rate of 99%, that sounds very impressive. But at a 10 million trade day, that's still 100,000 exceptions that need to be processed by the operations department. And there's no point whatsoever in having the technology capacity to deal with that and not having the operations capacity. I raise this as I think about it, and I think it's particularly pertinent to this agenda, because to me it's the outsourcers who often are the ones that see this terrain the most clearly. The challenges I've talked about are not specific to Deutsche Bank, they're the same to all the banks. And they're the same to all the technology and operating departments in those banks. And as the outsourcers, such as HCL and others, are dealing with a number of these different companies in different departments, often they can have a clearer view. And I think there's a chance for them to really look at how they can provide unique insights into how the industry can raise to these challenges, which I think will only continue to increase in the coming months. Thank you.